Hello and welcome back to the Marine Conservation Happy Hour. I am your host, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Scarlett. I'm Dr. Scarlett Smash. That's Dr. Craken. I was about to blend us both together, but we practically are one person, Dr. Craken. And we did a few special episodes that were fun. And now we're going back to science-y again. And we had a request. Someone requested Dr. Kraken to do a nerdy episode on if you can fit a bunch of whales on a Klingon spaceship. So this better I mean, we're going to be going into engineering, I would think, right? This is I'd like
We're
to
going
know.
to be talking science and engineering, marine biology.
Okay, yeah,
engineering.
because I have many questions. Like, are these whales from Earth?
Oh yes.
Okay,
Oh
so
yes.
they are whales from Earth. What kind of whales are we looking at? What kind of whales are we thinking about?
Now, okay, so you are not a huge Star Trek fan like
No.
I am. No. Now, of all the Star Trek movies you should watch, Star Trek 4 is the one you definitely have to watch because this is the one with the whales. So this one was filmed. This was actually filmed because Leonard Nimoy, who plays Mr. Spock, was a really big whale fan. He was very into saving the whales, and so this story was written to sort of highlight the problem of illegal whaling in the 1980s. So the story goes, if you haven't seen it before, there's this alien probe that arrives at the Earth in the future, and it is playing this really loud sound at the Earth, which they translate, and they realize it is humpback whale song. But humpback whales were driven extinct by whaling back in the 20th century. So
oh my God, they're trying to find humpback whales. Like if there's a single one, like we think they're extinct. So are they coming back to Earth trying to, just in case, double check to see if there's any humpback whales?
They know that there are humpback whales in the 1980s. So they go back to the past, to California in the 1980s, and they use a Klingon bird of prey battle cruiser. So to do this, they do kind of like Superman did in one of the Superman movies, sort of zip around the sun, and they go back in time, and they arrive in San Francisco in the 1980s in their Klingon bird of prey.
So these aliens want nothing to do with humans and only care about communicating with the humpback whales.
They only care about communicating with the humpback whales, and of course there are none left. And the noise is so loud that it's causing a lot of damage, and they're worried that, you know, it's going to kill people, blah, blah, blah. So they have to get whales from the past in order to communicate with this.
Okay, but if it was that loud, wouldn't it have hurt, you know, the humpback whales?
Well, they do actually explain this because the sound, when it's underwater, it is like humpback whale song underwater. But on the land, it's so loud and so intense that it's causing lots of damage.
It's not penetrating the water that much that it's so loud. Oh, I got you.
Exactly. So it's worse for sort of the land creatures.
And you know what? These aliens are like, who cares about the humans?
Because they're not important. Yeah, then, you know,
exactly.
There's monkeys running around on the surface of the planet. It's the whales clearly the most important.
That's hilarious.
So this Klingon spaceship, and by the way, the Klingon spaceship design is actually based on either a Canada goose or it's based on a cormorant. So they actually used biology when they were designing this spaceship. So of course, if you're a Klingon and you want to have a very warlike creature, then the Canada goose is obviously, you know, the apex predator on the planet. If anyone's encountered a Canada goose.
Yes.
Very dangerous. Anyway, so how many humpback whales can fit into a Klingon spaceship? So I did some research into this.
Okay.
And there's one scene in the movie where the Klingon spaceship hovers over a pirate whaling vessel. So at the time, the international ban on whaling had been introduced by the International Whaling Commission, but there were still countries that were illegally whaling. And this sort of highlights this. So the Klingon spaceship flies down over an illegal whaling ship. And from that, you can estimate that the spaceship is about 300 meters wide. Now, if you go into some of the nerdy Star Trek books and manuals and so on, well, then the Klingon bird of prey is only 50 meters wide. And in fact, throughout the movie, it changes size. So they didn't really sort of standardize the model that they were using in the location. But even at 50 meters wide, you can just fit into the cargo bay a 15-meter humpback whale. But Chief Engineer Montgomery Scott, or as we know, Scotty, tells us in the movie that the two humpback whales weigh 40 tons each and about 45 to 50 feet long, so about 15 meters. And he calculates the cargo bay can hold at least 18,000 cubic feet, or 500,000 liters of water. And then that can support the whale. And the cargo bay is 20 meters long and at least 10 meters high. So technically the cargo bay, according to Scotty, and he is, the best engineer. So he says that the whales will fit in there.
Okay, but we got to also think about space. You know what I mean? What is ethically acceptable for how much space each humpback whale needs for the swim?
Exactly. And this is the 1980s. So there are a number of laws in place, including the Marine Mammal Protection Act. There's the Endangered Species Act. There's APHIS, the animal.
Shout out to Naomi Rose.
Yes. Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, APHIS regulations in the Department of Agriculture, and they implement the Animal Welfare Act. So there's a variety of regulations for captive marine mammal handling and care. And there's also international regulations as well, with the Convention on the International Trade in Endangered Species. So there's a bunch of laws that will be in place in the 1980s. So, for example, to transport any cetacean, you need to have a sling and supportive padding because their ribs are collapsible. So if you had them just lying on the bottom of a tank, then their ribs could collapse and they could damage their internal organs, which is one of the big problems when you have a large whale that strands. So in the movie, there's no padding, there's no sling, they just have them in a tank of water. Now, the regulations also say that the transportation should be temperature controlled. And in the movie, they basically go around the sun to go back to the future. And you see the crew in the spaceship sweating. And particularly William Shatner, he's just sweating buckets. He's like me in Florida, a big sweaty mess. So clearly they have no air conditioning in this Klingon spaceship.
Okay, but they will need to make sure they have air conditioning and keep the water cool.
Absolutely. They need to keep the water cool in
that
for
means
the whales.
that you're going to have, I'm sorry, but you will have to have like at least a room to keep the cool water going and filtrating into the storage or pool or whatever your humpback area is.
Absolutely.
So we got to think about that's going to be even more space to have just
so they don't have that. They just have a tank. And actually coming to the tank, so CITES, Convention on the International Trade in Endangered Species, says that for marine mammals, they should be in a container which is no more than 1/2 to 2/3 immersed in water because, as they're traveling, the water can slosh and it could potentially go over the top of their blowhole and they could drown or asphyxiate. And in the movie, the tank is almost full to the top. So there's a real problem of risk of drowning and being battered during the flight, particularly seeing as they're going so fast. So they break the regulations in
Wait
this.
a minute, but I mean, it's not like they're having turbulence. There's no turbulence. They're going through air. so quickly that they shouldn't have any kind of turbulence.
Well, to take off from the planet, there's going to be a lot of turbulence to begin with.
Okay, I see. I
And
got it.
then, as they're going around, they're producing these sort of centrifugal and centripetal forces as they're
Mhm.
going round and round in the sun. And so it will sort of slosh to one
I
side
see.
unless they've got artificial gravity. But you see in the movie, they're all going, "Ah!" Like a plane going through a storm.
Yeah, I've never seen this, but why don't they have like
Well, there's a whole thing in Star Trek about why don't they have seatbelts? Because
oh,
they
okay.
are constantly being thrown around the
Oh, that's
bridge
fine.
whenever they bang into anything or get hit by things. They have very poor health and safety. They totally should have
They don't care. They're
seatbelts.
just letting everyone fly all over the place. No
Absolutely.
seatbelts at
Most
all.
injuries on the USS Enterprise are caused by people being flung about the bridge and crashing into consoles.
And then they had that with these. I mean, they had the same thing. Like people that were monitoring the humpback whales, were they also falling all over the place?
Well, they're on the bridge and they're sort of going, oh, as they're going faster and faster
Okay.
and faster. So
I got it.
clearly there's no control there. Now, as I said, CITES. So humpback whales then were listed on CITES Appendix 1, which means you need a permit to export the whales and then a permit to import them if you're traveling them. Now, technically, the whales are transported from San Francisco to San Francisco in the future. So they are going from the same place to the same place, admittedly a couple of hundred years later. But to take off, they go through multiple different countries' airspace. So that requires a permit. So they didn't have all their paperwork in place.
What about ventilators? They must have put some gigantic air ventilator over their blowholes, right?
No, they didn't. They didn't have like a mask or anything over their blowholes. There is just sloshing around
This is pure chaos.
in
I'm
the
glad
tank.
I didn't
Absolute
watch
chaos.
this.
Absolute chaos. So they didn't have the paperwork. They
Okay.
also they wouldn't need permits under the Marine Mammal Protection Act and so on and so on. None of this stuff. So now one of the biggest problems is that one of the whales they discover is pregnant.
Oh, Lord.
And transporting a pregnant whale is very hazardous and is against guidelines as well. So they should definitely not have been transporting this poor pregnant female whale. So there are a number of regulations, both US Animal Welfare, Marine Mammal Protection Act, and CITES regulations that they violate. Now, Mr. Spock is from Vulcan, but Captain Kirk is a US citizen because he was born in Iowa. He only works in outer space.
Who's born in Iowa? I don't think I've ever met anyone born in Iowa. And of course, the most famous person on Star Trek is born
in Iowa. And in fact, there is a plaque saying, here is the future birthplace of Captain James T. Kirk in Iowa, if you want to track it down.
Of course.
So he's born in Iowa, and in the 1980s, as a US citizen, he would be beholden to the Marine Mammal Protection Act and these various different laws.
Mm-hmm.
So he could have been charged with conspiracy to smuggle an endangered species. And the average penalty for wildlife crime at this time for the Department of State would be about 4 years, 10 months. So technically, Captain Kirk, for his egregious law breaking in transporting these two poor humpback whales into the future, should be arrested and go to jail.
Mm-hmm. I still have questions about this ship because did they talk about how they would have had to like gut like the interior just to create this area?
They did, actually. They did.
Oh,
they talked
did?
about emptying the cargo bay. They jettisoned a lot of stuff. And unfortunately, spaceships in the Star Trek movies do have a tendency to crash. And they did crash the Klingon spaceship into San Francisco Harbor. And they let them go. But they did transport a marine biologist from the 1980s from a facility which was basically Monterey Bay Aquarium.
Okay.
They changed the name, but it was basically Monterey Bay Aquarium.
Yeah.
And they did take a marine biologist to accompany the whale. So they did have a qualified marine mammal scientist they transported into the future because they had no marine mammal biologists there who had studied humpback whales. But as we mentioned before, on Star Trek spaceships, they do have marine mammals because they do have a facility called Cetacean Ops where they have killer whales, bottlenose dolphins, and beluga whales who all help as members of the crew with interstellar navigation. And one of the best depictions of this is in Star Trek Lower Decks, which is one of my favorites.
Ooh, I want to dive into that.
Oh, yes. We can come back to that, but Star Trek Lower Decks has a beluga whale crew who help with navigation, and it's a very good depiction of beluga whales. And of the different types of species they could choose, belugas are actually a good one because they would have very good three-dimensional navigation because they navigate under the ice and have to find air holes to come out through the ice. So it makes perfect sense that you have these to help navigate 3 dimensions in space. And of course, humans are used to flat, whereas beluga whales, their whole environment is three-dimensional. So it makes a lot of sense having them as crew. So watch Lower Decks and you can see their Cetacean Ops crew.
Well, that was fun. I was like thinking I was going to be super bored during this, but no.
Thank you. How could you ever be bored with anything I said?
No. No, it's just that I guess the older Star Treks when I was a kid kind of bored me. I mean, I liked when they would go, fast speed. Ooh, that's cool. And I liked it when, they had more interactions with Klingons and stuff like that. But I was just so bored of like the romance between I don't know, the hot white guy with the nurse or something like that. I was just, even to the day I was a kid, I was like, oh, no one cares about this. Give me the cool stuff.
Well, Star Trek was groundbreaking for its time because it had the first interracial kiss on TV.
Oh, yeah.
It had a lot of social issues. I mean, that was the whole thing. It was basically social philosophy with a little bit of action in the episodes. Yeah. The pacing is a bit slow and the budget is kind of Doctor Who level budget, But if you watch the recent series, A Strange New World and Lower Decks, highly, highly recommended. I think you'll find they're a lot of fun and there's a lot of social issues that they still do today. So I am very, very fond of Lower Decks myself. It is hilarious. And also Strange New Worlds, the new series, which they've got a new series coming up soon. Absolutely adore that. So if you want to watch Star Trek Smash, I suggest those 2. And then we can tell you about all the other episodes too.
Okay. Cool. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. And thank you so much for being part of the Marine Conservation Happy Hour crew. Hey, Marine Conservation Happy Hour crew. Don't forget to hit subscribe and follow us for future episodes. And also, refer us. We'd love it. We would also like to hear from you, so please contact us on social media, or you can email us about a topic that you're interested in hearing about. If you're interested in sponsoring this podcast, or you would like us to come visit your science facility and do a live episode, email us at info@absolutelysmashingllc.com. This podcast was edited and produced by Absolutely Smashing. The music is produced by Jolly Shore Leave. Thank you again for listening, and we couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for being part of the Marine Conservation Happy Hour crew.